Thank you all for being here tonight. Welcome to Showtime Toastmasters 5th Monday workshop. So our presenter tonight is Trish Blackwelder, and she is a respected expert and longtime ambassador for the Pathways Educational Program. Trish has used her knowledge and experience to identify and deliver training on some of Toastmasters' most challenging topics. As a member of several online clubs around the world, she was inspired to create this session to explore the role of Toastmasters Zoom Master. So please welcome distinguished Toastmaster Trish Blackwelder.
Thank you for being here tonight. We are definitely going to be talking Zoom Master. To do that, though, we'll need to have some extra background. So I want to, all right, my screen's just jumped, just a moment. Okay, everything's solved down. All right, so here's our agenda for tonight. We'll be talking about Zoom accounts. I'm not going to assume that everybody is familiar with Zoom. Yes, there are other platforms out there besides Zoom, but right now Zoom is the most popular. So we'll focus on Zoom platform and Zoom accounts tonight. We'll also talk about those virtual meeting settings that you need to be aware of when you're establishing your account. And we'll, of course, talk about the Zoom meeting space and Zoom, obviously, host and co-host roles, which is really the purpose of our agenda tonight. So before I jump into this presentation any further, let me ask if there's anything else specific that someone thought they were going to hear about tonight that wasn't on that list, so I can make sure to try to cover it for you.
Trish, I thought in the promotion we had said we would talk about that level 4 project about online meetings.
That will be in my presentation tonight.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll get into that when we get into the host and co-host roles. Okay. All right then. Anything else? Going once, going twice. Sold. When your club decides to go hybrid or full online, the #1 goal should be to achieve a full online club experience. So we're talking tonight about moving from using a Zoom platform as a one-on-one meeting with just between you and someone else to a full online club experience. We'll be talking about getting started and the important Zoom account details, features, and tools that you'll want to make sure that you're aware of. And we'll also be talking about how you're going to sustain the success of your online club meeting experience by raising up qualified Zoom masters, both hosts and co-hosts. When a club decides to go hybrid or full online, then they do have to recreate this club experience, but most clubs struggle with defining what that's going to look like, which makes it our #1 objective for tonight. To accomplish this, you will need to understand the Zoom platform. You will also need to understand the details around the 2 additional roles we'll be suggesting you create: the Zoom Master Host and the Zoom Master Co-host. Now, the benefit for these 2 roles is how well they can also help prepare members for their level 4 Manage Online Meetings elective. The project specifically calls for planning and conducting an online session. And while the project specifically calls for this conducting of a webinar of 20 to 25 minutes, where you'll also be presenting with visual aids, the Zoom Master role won't meet the requirements of the project fully, but it will lean heavily on the skills that you'll learn as a Zoom Master host in order to be able to successfully complete the level 4 project. So any questions around the level 4 project right now? Nope. Okay, moving on. Let's level set. Based on a conventional in-person meeting setup, guests would enter the room through an entrance, and a greeter would be there to meet them. A resource table will be set to the side that has a guest book, copies of the agenda, marketing materials, all of that stuff available for a guest to be able to collect and review on their own. In some cases, a member buddy may also be introduced to the guest. This would be someone that would sit with them to assist with any questions or concerns they might have during the course of the meeting. Now, if we move to a hybrid environment, we add cameras, okay, computers, but a hybrid meeting format is going to rely heavily on a gallery view, and a gallery view alone won't meet world headquarters standards for hybrid meetings, one of which is to require that all attendees be able to see each other at all times. So both the people in the room must see all the people that are connected remotely, all the remote connecting folks must be able to see everyone in the room at all times. I bring this up, and I am quite adamant about it because Showtime Toastmasters almost lost their charter over the fact that we didn't have a room set up when we first went hybrid that supported everybody being able to see everybody all at one time. Boy, did we scramble really fast in order to change our room configuration. Now, this is going to involve positioning cameras. And how many cameras? Well, that's going to depend on how your in-person participants will be connecting to the meeting. We're going to get through Zoom Master and Zoom Co-host before we talk about more hybrid meeting room configurations. But if there's time at the end, if you have some questions about hybrid room configurations, I will entertain them at that time. The point that I want to make here is that the item most overlooked when moving to a virtual meeting space is the resource table items up in the corner. Most clubs just forego the resource table, and they don't have anything then for their virtual guests attending their meetings, or establishing that closeness environment where they're meeting people, sitting with someone, having the right materials in front of them, and all of that. So for hybrid and fully online meeting experiences, you really need to have conversations around the meeting resources and what's going to need to be recreated for digital delivery. Now, about that Zoom account. The deciding factor about what type of Zoom account you're going to get has nothing to do with the number of attendees that will be in your meeting, because for both the free account and the pro account, they will allow up to 100 attendees on either in either configuration. The deciding factor here is how long your meetings are going to be. A free account will only allow you to schedule meetings up to 40 minutes in length, while a pro account extends the time allowance to 30 hours. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have 30-hour Toastmaster meetings, but you can keep a meeting open for up to 30 hours if you have a pro license. So now you have to have a conversation again in your club, because a free account is really nice. A pro account is $150 a year. Well, let's see what that really breaks down to. If your club is maintaining charter strength of 20 members, $150 per year divided by 20 members comes out to $7.50 per member per year. If your club is collecting club dues, on top of membership dues, you're talking about an investment of about 63 cents per month. So if you were collecting $1 in club dues from your members, you'd always have enough funds in the account to be able to pay for your pro license. So it really is a club commitment to purchasing a license and having that available for conducting your meetings on a regular basis. Any questions about this? I'm sorry, I'm apparently kind of silly tonight. And I promise I'm only drinking water.
If I may make a comment, a lot of clubs don't have 20 members in there, so you need to adjust for that in terms of cost. I mean, it's the same total cost. But
Understood. But ideally, clubs are supposed to maintain charter strength.
they are, yes. And if you have more than that, then it's even cheaper.
Yes.
Per person.
All right. Now you have your account, but wait, there are configuration details that can make or break your success. So plan on spending time talking to experienced Zoom masters or reading user help on Zoom support so that you make sure that you understand the configuration settings and set them correctly for your needs. One common question that I get a lot of is the registration. Why do you require registration for your meetings? Well, remember that resource table. One of the items that you would generally have on the resource table is a guest book. And if you're doing required registrations for your Zoom events, the registration process serves as your guest book. It records the name, full name, and email address of your attendees. And it also allows you to send them confirmations like the confirmation you got for tonight's workshop. And it avoids having to post your link to your virtual meeting on a publicly accessible site or location. Zoom crashers love when people do that because it's free access to someone's Zoom meeting. And in the 3 years now I've been involved in doing Zoom meetings, I have seen 2 crashers come into the Toastmasters meeting, and we've had to kick them out and lock them out. So always be sure that your Zoom links to your meetings are behind access controls, like on the top of the member agenda. If you're using free Toast, you can put it at the top of the agenda because members have to log in to be able to access the agenda. Any questions around this? There are other nifty things that you can do when you're doing required registration, and that is you can do some personalization. For example, when you registered for this event tonight, this title up here was what came out of the topics field of the meeting configuration, and the description that you saw here was what came out of the description field in the meeting setup. So you have that creativity to add some personalization to certain things. Then you've got first name, last name, and email address. Those are standard in order to be able to register. Okay. These types of settings will be in the profile area or the settings area or in the meetings area when you're working with actually creating a meeting event. Other settings that you need to be aware of before you just start scheduling meetings is in meeting basic configuration settings and in meeting advanced settings. Basic settings include things like who can or cannot use chat features, who can or cannot post files in the chat, whether hosts or co-hosts are notified audibly of people joining and leaving the meeting. That would only be the host and co-host that would hear that. The participants don't actually hear it. And then there's advanced settings, would include things like captioning being on or off. And if you have deaf or hard of hearing members, or are entertaining prospective guests that may become members. Captioning is something that we've discovered in Showtime is an absolute must to turn on. The advanced settings also control things like breakout rooms and whether they're available for use and who can or cannot share their screens or record. And if you're going to allow members and participants to record, make sure you insist they record locally and not up in your Zoom account storage. You'll find these options here. There's in-meeting basics, in-meeting advanced. This image on the right happens to be the in-meeting basics. And over here on the right is the advanced. And here's breakout rooms and captions. I was surprised to see how many languages the captions are available in. I hadn't seen the list recently and was surprised when I went in to take the screenshot. Some of these settings will be locked by the administrator of the account. So you'll need to work with whoever creates the account to make sure that you have rights to make the configuration settings. Others are always open and available for anyone to reset. Okay. And when we get into the presentation, I rely on Bobby or for anyone to just shout out if they need me to speed up, slow down, or have a question. I actually lose the window and can't see the gallery anymore.
I have a question about these settings. So these settings, are they, I see these are in their personal settings for the account itself. Do all of these have to be pre-configured prior to starting or launching the meeting in order for these settings to be applied, or can they be updated in real time? Say you don't know a guest is going to join who may be hard of hearing and requires captions while you're in the meeting. Can that be altered?
Yes, it can be altered, and some of these settings can be configured on the fly. When we get to the toolbar, I'll show you where you do it. Great question, Kat. I can always count on Kat for great questions. Excuse me. All right, any other questions around the configurations? We're not here to really do configurations. If you need to work with an experienced Zoom master, you can always reach out to me or another experienced Zoom master if you want help setting the configurations. Most of them are set automatically, so you can choose to just go with the defaults until you figure out what you really need to modify. It's not as though you have to touch all of this before you can have your first meeting. You just need to be aware that if there are certain needs that you have for your meetings, you may have to spend some time in configurations, making sure they're set properly. Okay. All right. Welcome to your newly configured virtual meeting space. Woohoo! You have an account. You've opened your first meeting. Now what do? Okay, we are recommending that there are two roles that you'll want to create for your meetings, the Zoom host and the Zoom co-host. And you'll hear me say that several more times still. There's more to managing an online meeting than meets the eye. If you think one person can do it all, well, there are a few that might be able to do it all, but they won't want to do it for very long. And Kat and Hovey both have witnessed me having to fill all of the Zoom master roles in a meeting and try to be the timer or be a speaker or something else. And I've never been able to really pull it off successfully. So we don't recommend it. Remember, the goal is to recreate as close to the in-person meeting experience as possible. And to do that well, it's really going to take more than one person to accomplish it. Now, another call out here. You see, this image is the Welcome to Showtime Online. This host image comes from the user profile for the Zoom account. And so hint, hint, here's an opportunity to promote your club. Don't don't forget to upload an image that will serve as this placeholder before cameras are started, before people turn on video. All right, it just gives them something to look at. And on the slide, you'll also see more detail around what the Zoom master and the host and co-host are. At a high level, we're talking about the Zoom master being the more experienced of the two. They are going to take on things like polls and ballots and grant permissions to share and record. They may take the lead on reading disclaimers, which we'll talk about in just another slide or two. And they're going to make sure that participants maintain proper Zoom etiquette, making sure they're mute if they're not speaking, that they're not doing distracting behaviors, that they're over talking other participants and etiquette breakage like that. They will provide feedback to the group on best practices for utilizing virtual spaces, and your Zoom master is basically taking the technology lead for coaching and supporting not only the Zoom master co-hosts, but helping members resolve issues they may have audio or video wise. The Zoom master co-host, on the other hand, is the intern. They are coming up through the ranks to learn the controls. And for them, the load is a bit lighter. However, you might have them join and open the meeting earlier because they get that experience being the greeter and helping people rename themselves and do their audio checks and so forth. The load is a little bit lighter, not as heavy technology or knowledge wise, and they're acting very much as a sergeant at arms in this capacity, and that they're just getting people organized and getting people prepared for the meeting. A co-host gets familiar and comfortable with the Zoom environment and operating the Zoom controls and coaching people on how to operate their Zoom controls, which are all good things then to lay a good foundation before they move into some of the more advanced technology skills that you need. The role is typically filled by a member wanting to learn more about hosting Zoom and virtual meeting spaces. So if someone wanted to do the level 4 project, they would go through both cycles as a co-host to start learning and as a host to have reached level of mastery. All right, there's got to be some questions out there.
Trish, this is Bobby. And as I recall, there are certain technology functions or Zoom functions that the co-host cannot do, that only the host can do?
That is correct. Polls being one of them. Only a host can create or edit a poll, but a co-host can launch a poll, but they cannot edit or create one. That's the one we bump into the most often. And we're going to come back and talk about that again in just a couple of slides. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Hold on to your seatbelt. These are all the things that have to be managed and watched and supported during the course of a virtual meeting. And it's not quite everything. It's just the most common things. When you start taking a look at all the things that need to be monitored and managed during the meeting, you can see that it's definitely more efficient to have 2 people at the controls. As a VPE, I always cringe whenever I see a member sign up to be the Zoom master and another functionary role. It's a situation set up for disaster. By the time you're monitoring mutes, whether people are muted or not, by the time you're making sure people are visible in their camera and know how to use their camera controls, recording or not recording, running polls or not running polls, helping people with raising their hand or using other reaction icons to indicate status, monitoring the chat window, maybe having to send chats to people with advice on how to resolve an issue, and still monitoring all the participants to make sure that they're muted or have their video cameras on. It's a lot to cover. It is a lot to cover, which is why we think that 2 is better than 1. Divvying the controls is also a great way, as I mentioned earlier, to intern your Zoom Master co-hosts. In other words, bring them up as full Zoom Master hosts. So how do you divide and conquer with training Zoom Masters in mind? Oh, that's a great question. Let's move on. When Nancy and I were first looking at the level 4 project manage online meetings, and we were trying to find out how well it would align with the role of Zoom Master or co-host, we decided we'd make a list of everything that has to be monitored during the meeting. And we came up with 12 items that needed to be done. Okay, 10 if you don't count reminding the co-host and host to actually log in. Okay, but that's still a lot of things. So how do you divvy out the 10 or 12 depending on how you're going to count them? Well, based on our experience, we're dividing the tasks based on tasks that require more experience for the host and tasks that require less experience, which would be the ones for the co-host. So why does the host get the extra 5 minutes before they have to join the meeting? Well, it's because they have more setup tasks that need to be done before the meeting actually starts. Polls, breakout rooms, preparing a PDF version of the agenda. And we all know that agendas might not be finalized until right up to the start of the meeting, which is very unfortunate, but happens more frequently than we like to admit. Having the co-host get the Zoom opened and start greeting members and guests, helping them rename themselves, performing audio and video checks. These are all great warm-up activities, like the activities that usually occur at the resource table in an in-person meeting. And these are tasks that help ensure that the meeting gets started on time. So anybody disagree with how we divvied them out? I'm going to take silence as agreement. I've also included in the slide here samples of disclaimers we've developed in Showtime since we moved to fully online meetings. What has it been, almost 3 years ago now? And let's start digging deeper into what these duties really are and what you and how you would perform them. All right, so you want to start with co-host or you want to start with host? You guys get to choose. Quick, speak up now.
Co-host.
Co-host.
All right, we'll start with co-host then. If you're going to take the role of letting the co-host get things rolling while the host finishes up those pre-meeting activities, then the co-host would be responsible for things like sending the registration confirmations out on the day of the meeting. Our experience tells us to try to send them out by 1 p.m. or around 1 p.m. because so many people use their work email addresses as their contact address. If you don't catch them before they leave the office for the day, then they won't get the confirmation. And the confirmation is an important reminder. Plus it has the meeting details, the link to log in and so forth. So we have found our goal is to make sure those go out by 1 p.m. the day of the meeting to try to catch people while they're still at work. Having the co-hosts do this will also confirm to the host that when they see the confirmation go out, they'll know that the co-host was successful in logging into the account and getting the confirmations out, and that all that went well for the co-host, so they should be set to log on later and start the meeting. Now, when Showtime started virtually, we couldn't decide whether 10 minutes was good, 15 minutes was good, 20 minutes was good, half hour was good. how far in advance of the start time did we really need to open the meeting? What we have found is that the 15-minute marker is comfortable. Speakers like to arrive early in case they want to share and make sure they know how to work the share controls. If there's someone that's going to be recording themselves for the first time, it gives you that chance to work with them for a few minutes. And it provides the social environment of what happens in an in-person meeting when guests arrive. There are people in the gallery view. You can have conversations. You can greet people. You can go, oh, well, this is Kat, and she's from my home club, and I'm so glad she made it to the meeting tonight. Because I can introduce then Kat to the other people that are already in the meeting. So that social time, don't underestimate the power of that social time. Guests appreciate that they're not just dropping into a virtual meeting and everything's starting up and they have no idea what's going on yet, and they just, this is crazy, I don't want to do this, and they don't come back again. So use that warm-up time, use that social time of 10 to 15 minutes. We think 15 minutes is a good landing spot, but you will decide what is best for your club. Make sure that you use the time to welcome guests. Think about the things that are on that resource table. If you have a guest welcome packet, when you were an in-person meeting, then you have a digital guest welcome packet now that you can put in the chat and direct send to the guest when they arrive. It could be something that you send in advance to a guest based on the registration information. One of the online clubs that I am in, we have someone that actually checks the registration list, and as more people register, they have an information packet and a welcome that goes out to the people as they register for the event. I thought that was kind of wow. I hadn't heard of any other club that was using the registration list to do that kind of pre-introduction for a guest, but that's a good idea. It also gives you a chance to help participants with the renaming on arrival and do your etiquette reminders. There's a Showtime members. For the benefits of our guests, we are prefacing your name with your functionary role. Please do not rename yourself. Sometimes, until your members really learn that there's a standard way you want them to name themselves, then it's best that perhaps the co-host just take it over. They have a copy of the agenda. Evaluator number 1 comes into the meeting, and as soon as they're on the list, they can go ahead and rename them with EV1 or whatever the standard's going to be, so that they are easily found in the participant list. Remember that part of the reason is to help everybody know who's doing what, but another one is if you're going to be using breakout rooms, having a standard identification for your meeting roles makes moving people in and out of breakout rooms much, much easier. So it's something else to think about. If there are audio or video checks that you need to do, this is another good best practice I picked up from one of my other online clubs outside of District 3. That our sergeant at arms does the audio check. And so when everybody arrives, your first question is, so what's the weather like where you're at today? Because we have people from all over the world. And so everybody just does a 1 or 2 sentence on what the weather's like in their area, and that's their audio check. Please don't get into that. If you could test your microphone, testing 1, 2, 3, testing 1, 2, 3. Make it something fun. So if it's a standard question, if it's a standard statement, if it's a question of the day, whatever, if it's an interesting fun fact, that you want somebody's opinion on, make it a fun exercise to do your video and audio checks. Sometimes we have headsets that aren't positioned right, or their earbuds aren't working today for some reason. And so you just stick with it until you finally get them at the sound quality that they need to be. And a lot can be said too about positioning, because when we speak on a virtual screen, I know I have my display positioned that gives me kind of a framework for where I can gesture. If I gesture over here past my display, I'm out of camera. If I gesture down here below my frame, I'm out of camera. So the position of where I am I too low in the frame physically? Am I too high in the frame? Am I right in the middle where I need to be? These are all things that can help a speaker have a better speech. And so those audio checks and the video checks are important things, but make them fun when you do them. Okay. You can also have the co-host moderate the participant chats and the mute status. Okay. It's like being an odd-counter or grammarian, and you don't realize how much you have to really listen. All right. Visually, for monitoring mute buttons and the chat is very visual, and you can't have it become so distracted that you're not paying attention to anything else then that's going on in the meeting. So it's a skill that needs to be practiced regularly, in learning how to scan to see if anybody's off mute, scan to see if somebody's gone off video, and then also if there's a new chat that has appeared in the chat window. You usually get a little indicator that says new message, which means you have to scroll down to see what the new message was. So those are things that you have to practice, how to balance doing that with paying attention to what's also going on in the gallery. And then launching polls on cue. Again, the host who has the host credentials is going to have the rights to create and edit those polls. The co-host is going to have the ability to launch them. So if the host has set everything up and it's ready to go, then the co-host can take over the responsibility for launching the polls, while the host may have other tasks that they're performing. If the co-host is going to be the one to launch the polls, then they will also more than likely close the polls, which means they will have the results. So if the results need to go to someone else to be announced at the end of the meeting, that's a little dance that you have to work out so they know who they're supposed to hand off the results to. Or you may change your agenda to have the co-host then read the results at the end of the meeting instead, to keep them super secret and only they're the ones that know. Okay. All right. Any questions about co-host duties?
For the first question, or the first number there, number 1, about sending registration confirmations, is that, I'm not sure what that looks like. Is that when you're logged into the account and you physically are sending out the Zoom links to the registered emails for that series?
Yes. And when I'm done sharing the presentation, I can show you where those are. But again, this is something that you all have to have agreed upon, so that you don't have multiple people trying to send out the confirmations again. Okay. These are the suggested recommendations based on our years of experience, but these all have to be agreed upon. So whoever's in the role of Zoom Master knows what the Zoom Master host knows what the Zoom Master co-host is responsible for, and they don't do the co-host jobs, they do the host jobs instead, and vice versa. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are we ready to dig into the host duties?
I have one question, and I'm not sure it's at the right point here.
Go
I'm
for
just trying to think back when all right. Do the Zoom master and I'm sorry, do the host and co-host log into Zoom on the same account?
They can.
Okay. How does Zoom know who the co-host is and who the host is?
Because Zoom assigns it based on first in. So the first one to log in with the account credentials will be assigned the host role. The second one that logs in will be assigned the co-host role. Now you can reset that. So in this scenario, the co-host is going to log in first. They'll end up being host. When the host shows up, then one of them will reclaim the host role and the other one becomes the co-host then.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a good question. All right. So the Zoom Master, they have several things that they would be responsible for. Again, this is our recommended solution. Everything is up for negotiation in your club. They would set up the meeting events and they would monitor the Zoom registrations. Okay, so they're going to, if they know that your meeting is every Wednesday night, then they can set up a recurring meeting event that will go out for 6 meetings, 12 meetings, 14 meetings. It can go out as long as you need it to go out. All right, but they will then, if there's a reason to cancel one or adjust one or throw in an extra wildcard meeting of some kind, typically they know how to go in and set up the meetings and run and know how to set the boxes for the check boxes for the way you want your meetings to operate and so forth. They create meeting templates so that somebody else can also, create them up if they're not available. But that's one of the roles of the Zoom Master. They manage that part of the Zoom account. They are the most experienced. It makes the most sense for them to be the one that does that. They prepare the polls, or some people call them the ballots, that only the host can create them. So when they log into the account, polls can be set up in advance of the meeting. And if you have a meeting series, like I was just talking about, a recurring series, the polls will inherit from the first to the next to the next to the next to the next meeting. So for like Leaders Plus, we have one for best functionary. All the functionary roles only had to be created in one poll, and then they've been inherited in every one of the recurring events in that meeting going forward, which was a really relief that you didn't have to recreate it every single time. Okay, is there a question in the chat? No? Okay. I just saw the number 1 come up on my chat. Okay. So preparing the polls or the ballots, whatever you prefer to call them, is the job of the host. Prepare any breakout rooms. Many clubs forego using breakout rooms, but there are times when you might want to. For example, if you have a new member voting in process, you may want to have a breakout room set up so the Zoom Master can take the new member being inducted and another member and send them to a breakout room while the discussion and the voting go on. in-person meetings, you would actually have them exit the room with the sergeant of arms, and then the members would have open voting in the room with the new member out, and then you bring them back in and welcome them, to the club. All right, so if you want to recreate the in-person experience, breakout rooms is an option that you can activate and use in that manner. They won't know what's going on in the main room while they're in the breakout room, and then you can pull them back into the main room when you're ready to announce the results and welcome them to the club. Prepare and post meeting agenda PDF to chat at meeting start. Now there's a caveat here. Remember that once you post something in the chat, any person that joins the meeting after that point will not see what you've posted. So it would have to be reposted again. So you don't want to post the meeting agenda too soon or before the meeting even starts, because not everybody may be there yet. You have to watch the participant list and make sure things have settled down and that the meeting has gotten kicked off, and now's a good time to post the agenda you think you've got everybody covered. Creating a PDF ensures that regardless of what software or operating system a person is running, the PDF will always render itself in the same format all the time, and that's why PDFs are so popular. You need to know how to take an agenda, a meeting agenda, whether you're using Word or whether you're using a free Toast agenda, and create a PDF from that document. So that is a skill that, again, is something that the host needs to learn. It may require special software, it may not. I have a PDF printer installed on my machine, so anything that I could send to a printer, I can send to a PDF printer, and it makes it a PDF, and that's the easiest way, to do it. So knowing not only how to create a PDF of the agenda, but also when the timing is on when it should be actually posted in the chat. Because there are these pre-activities that the host is responsible for, we give them the 5-minute, extra to spend on those types of things, and then actually logging into the meeting, reclaiming the host role, and reassigning the co-host to the co-host role. They can also start assisting with renaming participants if participants are still coming into the meeting. So that's something else that can be done jointly. Or if there are other tasks that need to be done, obviously that's a tag team that has to work that out. Because the host is the most experienced one of the two hosts, then reading the recording disclaimer and reminders about possibly muting people if they go over time. We encourage that the more senior or the more experienced of the two make those things. You don't want to end up in one of those, well, because I'm the host, and we have a club rule that says if you go over time, I will mute you. Okay. Some people may sit back a little bit, on that side. So there's a framing to it, or there's a language to it, and you will want to write those kinds of actual disclaimers so that they're read consistently the same way all the time. We have a pre-recording announcement that we do in Showtime. You can see it. It's the first one on the list, where as we're starting, our virtual meetings may be recorded by individual speakers or by our media officer for publishing to our YouTube channel and creating clips that we may choose to use for promotional material. If you do not wish to have your image and screen name recorded, please turn your video off now before we begin the recording. And that is supposed to be read at the beginning of as we start each meeting. It's also supposed to be read when we start these workshops, and I realized we didn't read it tonight. So if anybody objects to being posted on our YouTube channel when this video goes through its upload process at the end of the week, please make sure you let Bobby know before you leave tonight so that we can do what we can to try to edit that out. Okay. We have, in one of my clubs, we have a couple of people that are long-winded speaker that they almost consistently go past their speaking allotted time. And we have implemented the rule that we reserve the right to mute you if you go over time. And I think that's how we word it, which kind of softens it a little bit. But occasionally we still have somebody that goes over time, and we do mute them now. And it's become an expectation in the club that that will happen. Okay, number 6, grant permissions for sharing and recording. Okay. If you're looking here, you'll see that there's a security icon on the toolbar. This is where you can control user level permissions, like being able to share or not share. Share, I believe, actually can be under the share screen though. Depending again on the platform you may be using for your Zoom application, they might shift around a little bit on you. And then there's also the looking chat as to whether or not you're going to let everybody chat or lock chat down to only chatting with the host or co-host. Okay. All right. Questions about host?
So Trish, to clarify then, that security button, the icon at the bottom of the screen, that only shows up for the host and co-host, right? It wouldn't show up for a regular participant?
That's a great question. Everybody look at their toolbars. Do you have the security option?
I
No.
don't see it.
That's it.
And I
Then
do.
I think your assumption is correct, Bobby. And that would make sense that the security would only be available for host or co-host. And I believe I'm still assigned as co-host, so I see the security option. Okay, no more questions. All right. It is my expectation that I will always give you a resource list on any of the sessions that I teach these days. And so I have provided you a list of resources that are a good place to start. If you don't have a free Zoom account already, get one. So you can start practicing the skills you're going to need, not only as Zoom master, but you can also start preparing for your level 4 manage online meetings project, and you'll always have access to a Zoom account. Many of the items on this resource list can also be considered prerequisites for your Zoom co-hosts, as a list of things they should complete, training they should view, and so forth in preparation for Zoom master training. And yes, you should offer Zoom master training to anyone. If you are the experienced Zoom master in the club, you should offer Zoom master training to your co-hosts as a way of bringing them into the fold and preparing them to move up the ladder to become a Zoom master. Once co-hosts have mastered their 4 specific skills, remember the list, that they need to perform during the meeting, they should have developed the confidence and the calm in operating within the online environment to start expanding into the Zoom host roles. And there is a level of confidence you need to be a Zoom master, to be the actual host. And that confidence comes from practice and spending time in the environment. So the more you can encourage people to come into the co-host role and learn how to maneuver comfortably in a virtual meeting space. Feel comfortable with the toolbars, feel comfortable with turning mute on and off for people, helping them with their own controls. The faster they gain that confidence, and it just becomes, the old hat, kind of thing to them. It's like riding a bike. You have the training wheels, and then one day you get to take the training wheels off and you don't fall down. It's great. And you can ride like lightning then all around the town. Ideally, the role of Sergeant at Arms is what you would liken the co-hosts to. It's a good role for all club members to know how to create and oversee the virtual club experience. And so try to get more people to think of the co-host role as a Sergeant at Arms role. They're going to be the one that opens the meeting. They're going to be the first person that people generally see. They will stimulate the conversations. They will introduce people and so forth. It's really a good experience for all your members to know how to do that. Remember that the goal is to make every meeting, in person, hybrid, or online, a great meeting every time. And practice is how you get those great meetings to become standard for you.
There's a question in the chat from Hovey about which type of Zoom account allows setting up a breakout room.
In any of the accounts, if you are the account owner, you will have the controls to set up breakout rooms. Remember, if you're going to have multiple people logging in with those credentials, then you have to determine whether the host will only have them or whether the co-host will have them as well. And we've seen some funkiness with that, in that I think it's an access thing, and where they bump into one another, and then somebody loses the access and somebody else gets to keep it. But Zoom documentation is not the greatest documentation in the world. They don't explain things like that. So we learned the hard way that a host can create and edit polls and a co-host cannot.
And your screen is still sharing. We see the score for tonight. And you're just...
you?
And then...
Well, I haven't refreshed it, so I don't know what the score actually is. That was buried behind there.
Okay.
So I will stop sharing. There you go.
And Trish, I'm not sure if a free account can actually set up a breakout room. I think you
because you can have up to 100 people. I'm going to think that I'm going to be of the opinion that you can.
Okay. We should.
But that's a good thing to double check.
And I'd also like to make a comment, because when Showtime first was going online, 100% online, I went ahead and set up one of those free accounts, a Zoom account, and then I practiced by logging in and creating a meeting from my PC, and then I would send myself an email with the invite, which I would access then with my cell phone and my iPad. So I had 3 people in my meeting, and I would practice doing different things. And I also learned where the controls are. For example, when you're using an iPhone, it's totally different than when you're coming in from a desktop or a laptop.
Or an iPhone and an Android. Exactly. Totally different.
Yeah. So it was a good way to learn. And I did it all by myself. I didn't need to involve other people. But then in Showtime, we've also had practice sessions where we would try out new features on Zoom, and we would have a little Zoom fest, I guess you could say. Just a few of us log in and practice using whatever it is, and then bring it into the meeting.
When I was first learning Zoom, I did the same thing. I got a free account, and I have a big U shape. Some of you have seen the picture of my office, so it's 2 desks pushed, up together and into a big U. And so I was trying to learn, how the different, systems reacted, the different devices would react. So I have a Mac on one desk. I have I have a Windows machine on another desk. I have laptops, running 2 different versions of OS, and I have an iPad, and I have iPhone, and an iPhone. Okay, so I have the whole place lit up, the whole circle here. Just seeing how each device would work, and how each device rendered things, and if I wanted to have 2 presentations, how could I have 2 presentations available to me in one Zoom session, and so it's amazing how much you can play around and learn, and you're at no risk of anything. It's your free account. You're just trying things, but record yourself too. My podcast project, I talk about it a lot because I ended up with a special podcast voice, that I used when I was recording my podcast episodes that I still use in some of my speeches, but it was a whole different experience. I used big earphone type headset, which really blocked out all the external sound and allowed me to hear my own voice, to some degree. So when I was doing the recording, I could gauge myself as I was doing the recording. I had a boom mic that I used, to record with. But if you're practicing how to give a speech virtually, being able to practice with that Zoom account, whether it's free or whether you buy buy a license, it doesn't matter. The idea is, I learned where my frame was. My chair is the right height. My angle of my display is set. If I bump it, I have to remember to readjust it again. But I'm good to go. I can be all set up. I can go down the hall to the kitchen, grab something to eat, grab a water or whatever, come back, and I'm ready to jump in to the next Zoom meeting. So you have that. You create confidence, you create a comfort level, and by recording yourself, you're going to find out how you're most effective. I get good eye contact at this point. You can see my face. I know how far I can gesture. I know when I'm out of frame, and I can just go. It's just like standing up in front of a group now for me and speaking, the way I would. The only thing that's different is that I don't move from side to side or front to back. It's pretty much, this is where I'm at, this is what I operate in.
But I have seen you move around forward and backward giving a speech for impact. So
you can.
Yeah.
I do have to change the chair just a little bit and give myself the flexibility. When I did that, that was a crazy thing to have done, but it's amazing how much physicality you can add to a Zoom presentation. But you have to practice it to feel comfortable with it. Every person I've ever coached, I said, do you have a Zoom account? No, get a free one. Just go sign up for a free one and get started. And some never do it. They just won't do it, and I just go, okay, your choice, but don't ask me to coach you anymore.
Well, in today's world, I think online skills are just critical for anywhere.
Yeah.
Even in a large institution like the one that I work in, there's always a caveat. We used to want everybody to turn on, their video. All right, so everybody's face would be seen, so that adds, more personality, to the meetings, like you're in a real conference room. And the problem with that is that sucks up bandwidth. All right, so we've had people in a club that have to turn off their video for a while because they start having streaming problems. They start getting the whirligig, that it's kind of freezing and stuff. And so they might have to turn it off. They might have to do something to boost it. I have found that if I'm streaming for a Zoom, I really can't stream anything else. I used to try to play the baseball game on the other screen. Found out On certain nights, I can't do that. There's just too much demand, on the bandwidth in this area. So you have to know whether you can do that or not, or you have to know what you can turn off. It could be something that's really a heavy resource in your background, an application that you have running in the background all the time that all of a sudden affects your bandwidth on your internet connection if your provider is a little on the unstable side that night. Because let's face it, we all don't have T1s into our house, not yet anyway. Yeah, so you have to know what you might need to do to adjust on the fly in order to make your connection more stable. How do you learn how to do that? By playing around with it, figuring out what works and which doesn't work.
And Trish, there's another level of account beyond the pro account where you can do webinars and stuff? And I've never used that at all, but can you say anything about that? What you can do with webinar?
A webinar is very different from a Zoom meeting, okay? Most clubs are using this platform that we're using here tonight. It's a Zoom meeting. In a webinar, the expectation is that you will have a limited number of people. Think of a head table situation, all right, or a panel discussion. You're going to have people sitting on the panel, and you're going to have people in the audience. So there's two ways that this could go. You're going to have a panel of people. They're going to have rights to share. They're going to have rights to probably record themselves. They're going to have access to things that the participants, the people that would be sitting in the audience, will not have. The people sitting in the audience will only be able to watch and listen. That's it. Okay. They might be able to chat. Most times they can only do Q&A, meaning that there's somebody monitoring a Q&A. You have to put a question in. They will pass the question along to, you won't even get to talk. They will have to pass the question along to the group, and then the person will relay it, to the entire audience. So webinars are very different. If I'm doing a webinar instead of this setting, then I'm controlling everything, and you will have very limited interaction then as to what you can do. It would be like going to a webinar, somebody's up on the stage, they don't come down in the audience, you've got that distance between you, and the speaker has control of the mic and whether or not they'll let you talk. So that's basically the difference between a webinar and an interactive meeting. Here you can chat. Here you can interrupt and ask questions. Here I encourage you to interrupt and ask questions, because I want that interactivity with you. I want to hear what you're thinking about all of this. And so this is not a webinar. This is an interactive virtual session. Okay. Am I still sharing? I don't think so. No. Okay. What else? Last call.
I have a question about cameras, and this may be a little technical, but I'm curious if anyone here has ever tried this, or if you all have ever seen anyone else use this, but there's kind of this recent trend in, like, mostly it's lifestyle influencers, like people who are filming their life and streaming it on social media. They have these types of cameras that follow their movement as they're walking around a room. Has anyone ever tried that technology with a Zoom account and also at a Toastmasters club meeting? What were your thoughts about it, if so?
I have had an experience with a follow me camera. We were professional photographer who was a member of the club, got a follow me camera, brought it into the club, and asked the people that were speaking that night, I was one of them, if they would mind, if they recorded the speech. Now they did the recording, and then they posted, the recording. They were going to make the recording available. So that was early on with Follow Me cameras. I can tell you that for contests, for speech contests and Toastmasters, Follow Me cameras are forbidden. You cannot use them.
Oh,
Okay. They're considered an advantage, and the playing field has to be level. All right. So I've never seen anyone use one live stream in terms of Toastmasters. Okay. I'm aware that some of the TikTok creators and, that kind of stuff. And I don't pay a lot of attention to all that. So I haven't spent a whole lot of time watching them. But the Follow Me camera is an interesting technique as to how it does what it does. And it does it really well. It's very smooth. It's not herky jerky or anything like that. It actually worked a lot better than I thought it was going to. I'm not going to buy one, but I thought it was an interesting idea.
interesting. That's good to know. I didn't realize they would be forbidden or considered an advantage. I thought for like a hybrid type meeting, it might be more helpful when you're viewing the audience as a member, for anybody who's in person, if you're online giving a speech, or vice versa, giving a speech, and attendees can then see you. So maybe not a great solution. I know they're kind of expensive, but I was just kind of curious.
Right. When you're starting to talk about a hybrid situation, this is where how many cameras and the position of the cameras really comes into play, because what you need to have is an environment where everybody can see everybody at all times. So one of the easiest ways to accomplish that is to make sure you have cameras that can see everybody that's at the table. If you remember the diagram I had up, everybody that would be on one side of the table, a camera that's going to show everybody on the other side of the table, and a camera that will show whoever's at the front of the room. Now that can be modified. That can reduce your need for cameras if one of the things that you agree to do is that everybody that comes to the meeting in person will bring their device and put it on the table in front of them, so you can leverage their camera. And then it becomes just like this meeting right now. Everybody's sitting at a device. Everybody will be able to see everybody at all times. And there'll be one camera positioned to the front of the room to be able to show what's going on at the front of the room. So whether it's the speaker, the Toastmaster, the topics master, whatever, they are all on display then. And usually that's just another laptop then at the back of the table with the camera facing the front of the room, and that catches everything at the front of the room. And that gives your speakers a good 6 to 8 foot window that they have as stage, to move around in anywhere and still be seen on the camera that's at the back of the room. So now you just have to determine the quality of that camera. Will a laptop camera be enough, or does it need to be? It could be. Some of them are pretty powerful, but it might have to be like a little Logitech, camera on a small tripod on the table, that you can move that up a little closer to the front and get a little better frame, that way. But somebody has to be there early. Somebody has to know how to set all of that up and then keep it running. So usually when I've seen it done, there's a tripod with a Logitech or some other kind of camera, on it. And that's plugged into a laptop, and that person's sitting at the back of the room then driving that camera and monitoring it to make sure it's always got things in view. That would be like a co-host role, that could maybe do that. Or the host might have to do that, and the co-host would run the other part of the meeting.
And
If
so
I can add on to that, because my other club has hybrid meetings, and there are a couple of issues as well you need to deal with. One is microphone, because if everybody's using their own laptop for it, not going to work. So we have a microphone that we use just for everyone that's linked into one person's laptop. And we set it up so we have a panoramic camera that's pointing at the people in the room, and then another camera that is more directly at the speaker at the front of the room, the lectern, etc. And that seems to work fairly well, but it is tricky. There is definitely some setup time. Also, remember that you need to charge up batteries for things. So I get to do that every week for hours. So that's an issue. You can't just leave it there. But it works, but it always seems like there's something different that goes wrong each week too. So just try to keep a good attitude towards it.
And
It's
And when
amazing.
we first went hybrid in Showtime, we were encouraging people to bring their own devices, and we absolutely ran into the microphone problem. Managing your mute button is so key, because every device has to be muted, and only one can be unmuted at a time. All right, otherwise you get echo and feedback. So what we did instead was we bought a spider phone. I call them spider phones. They're a conference phone that you can hang spiders off of, to extend the mics. But we found one that worked really well for the size room we had. And we were able to set that out on a small table in the middle of the U, that everybody was sitting in. And that ran off of one person's laptop, and that picked up all the sound in the room. We were really fortunate that it worked as well in a room at the community center, because those rooms are linoleum floors, no soundproofing on the walls, and so you get a lot of sound bouncing around in there, and it was able to handle it really well. So we lucked out. I still have it in my bag. I'm not giving it up. It's never leaving my hands. I'm holding on to that puppy. Right.
Yeah,
so those
so
are things that you need to work on.
Yeah, we have that. We also have a Bluetooth speaker that we use too.
Yeah.
To help people hear what's going on as well.
Right. And what we ended up doing was we ended up hauling in a display, a third display. Someone actually brought in a third display and set it up on part of the U, and that was and then we attached a computer to that, and that had a regular Zoom window open like this, so we could see all the remote people on that display. And then we had cameras that allowed you to see the faces of all the other people that were in the room, and that was how we saved our charter. I did not want to be responsible for carrying that third display in and out of the room all the time, but we did what we needed to do at the time. All right.
We'll go ahead and
You've got 6 minutes. Last call for any questions, concerns, things you want to hit me up with, something that I forgot to show you that I said I would. Oh, I was going to show you how to get to the registrations. Okay, Bobby, you go ahead while I get this set up.
Go ahead with what?
Whatever. You started to talk and I cut you off.
Actually, I was going to just clarify that at the beginning of the meeting, you had said that in a hybrid meeting, everyone has to be able to see everyone. So you would need the display for the people sitting in the room to be able to see the people online. And you just covered that, so.
Oh, okay. Look at me.
But meanwhile, I'll just remind everyone that Showtime meets on second and fourth Monday nights, and we have our fifth Monday workshops, and we also sometimes have workshops maybe on the third Monday if someone has a project they want to do. Okay, we can see your screen, Trish.
Okay, so if this is tonight's meeting. All right, and right up here when you open the meeting, you don't have to open it and edit or anything like that. There's a tab for registration. It'll tell you how many people are registered, and if you want to view them, you go over here to view, and all you have to do is click here at the top and say you want to resend the confirmation email, and they all go out. Now what you have to watch for is when you have 2 pages. Okay, there's a couple of us. Bobby and I got bumped to page 2, and you would have to come to page 2 and click it again to make sure we got our confirmations. Okay, the select all isn't really select all, it's select all that's on the page that you're looking at. Okay, and that's
Do you want to do you want to show how to set up a poll?
Sure.
Before you jump to the polls, is that the same way you would resend a link to one individual?
That is one way to do it. Okay. The other way is to simply grab the invite, the registration link,
Okay, cool.
and you can copy that, or you can copy the invitation that gives you all the dial-in number options too. Okay. I usually, if I do the copy invitation, I cut out a lot of the excess stuff because it puts like the meeting ID in there two or three times and gives you all these dial-in numbers that nobody really needs, to have. You can add to calendars, to your own calendar right here really quickly. Okay, and then we don't have polls and quizzes set up for our workshops, but we could create one here. Okay, and you determine whether or not, but the question is, oh.
3-1, Diamondbacks lose.
Okay, thank you. 3-1, Diamondbacks lost. If anybody wanted to know, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. There are some, extra things, whether it's required, whether you showed as a drop down, whether you need to create breakout rooms as well, to manage this. I'm not going to flip all this stuff on. You can add another question if you want. If it's single choice or multiple choice, if you're going to allow for fill-ins, or you want a rating scale, it's actually pretty robust, given that it is a virtual meeting space, but they've beefed it up over the years, and so it's pretty good. But that's how you do that, and then you just save it when you're ready to save it. And if you want to edit again, okay, then you can go back into polls and quizzes, and they've just changed this. Oh, here it is. Okay, they've moved things around. All right, notice that it's still untitled, because title is one thing, question is another, and I always forget to put the title in. And then I have to save it again. Okay, so now it actually has a name, and I have not launched it yet. I can edit it here. Okay.
Question for you though, Trish, on this. I think you said before that the host is the only one who could do editing on this, but you were suggesting that the co-host would be the one to launch the polls. Do you have the host then doing the edits if you're trying to do voting for best speaker, best table topics, etc., where the table topics in particular could change?
Right. Mm-hmm. But again, the host can be, when you get to table topics, which is a perfect example, you don't know who the participants are until they actually get called on. So the host then can open the poll and be editing that as people are called on, while the co-host continues to monitor the other things in the meeting. So again, the co-host is still learning to juggle, for the most part and stuff. That doesn't leave them alone, but it leaves them in charge of the meeting, and while the host is actively editing the poll, which means they may be distracted and not be able to monitor that somebody has unmuted themselves inappropriately or something like that.
Okay, but either the host or the co-host could fix that, for example. Those are options that belong to both, I think, muting people or whatever.
Yeah, that's why I would leave the co-host in charge of the meeting and the participants, and I would, as the host, then take over editing the polls and making sure they're ready. But once I save them, they're ready to be launched. They'll be in the toolbar in the polls area, and they can pop them up and launch them. I could be working on something else. I could be editing a different one, you know, at that point. I say I because I referred to myself as the host. Yeah.
We should probably say too that the host and co-host don't get a vote when there's a poll.
That is true. You will not be allowed to vote. I don't know why. I didn't build it. I didn't sign off on the requirements. So, but I remember the first time I launched a poll and then realized I couldn't vote. And I was kind of bummed. So it's nice when I can log in as a member and not have to be the host or the co-host, because I get to vote then.
We could always count
All right.
yourself.
It is 8:01. I don't want to be over time because Bobby might mute me. So I hope you have stopped the recording.
I will stop it now.